Good. All right. You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
There we go. What's up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. Hopefully the echo is gone at this point, because for whatever reason my Twitch wasn't muted. But that's besides the point, even though, it was muted yesterday, whatever. I'm over it. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 54, we will go around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. We'll also be taking a look at rumored rosters for the 4 Pacific Division expansion teams. All that and so much more, but before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us for our live show tonight, our special Thursday night show this week on Twitch. And, of course, thank all of our repeat listeners. Of course, as always, I do have someone here with me tonight to help break everything down. It's another week without my soulmate. But joining me tonight is the ham-fisted taco himself, Spider. Spider, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to be back alive, breathing, all that fun stuff. Like you said, it's a special Thursday night show because a little under the weather earlier this week. But I feel good now. It all stemmed from I made my full transition to a middle-aged white person over the weekend, and we went apple picking. So then I had like a cough and all kinds of stuff after that. So, but I feel much better now, and I got to play a lot of games. I didn't play a whole lot of Overwatch, mostly Junkenstein, but I did play a lot of other stuff. I dabbled in like the Black Ops 4, promptly died, and then went to a different game. So I will circle back around that. But I'm getting hyped for BlizzCon, man. It's that season, and every time I'm like, yeah, BlizzCon, I'm like, man, I could be there, but I'm still hyped for it. And we actually have some pro Overwatch coming up before BlizzCon, which is even more exciting because there's been kind of this drought of pro Overwatch after Contenders ended and World Cup qualifiers and all that ended. And Spice, basically Spice. That's all we've had to live off of. So now we'll get some sustenance back. But what about you, man? How was your extended week?
It's been pretty good. I've been enjoying the cooler weather. So it's been hoodie weather here. Been dabbling in, Junkenstein's Revenge, of course, playing a little bit of Black Ops, primarily for zombies. I'm garbage at the Battle Royale mode, which is really no surprise. And, I feel like when people are asking me, well, how's the new Black Ops? I'm, not the right person to ask just because I hadn't played Call of Duty since Modern Warfare. So, my view on the franchise is far less tainted than what it would be if I were to be one of the players that would pick it up every time it came out every year.
Yeah, I played 2 games and they went very badly. And then, I watched Shroud play and I'm like, dude, Shroud makes this look easy. So here's what I need to do. I just need to do what he does and go down there and I died immediately again in the next 2 games I played. And then I was like, all right, I'm gonna go play Assassin's Creed or something.
Well, that's the thing about Shroud. Regardless of what FPS game it is, he does make it look easy. There's a reason why he's that prominent in the scene. But I am having a lot of fun with the zombies mode, and that's usually what I've been playing. I haven't really dabbled too much into the the basic multiplayer as of yet. But there's a lot more going on with zombies than I was initially anticipating, which is great to see. So there's a lot more going on than what I was expecting. So it's definitely added an extra layer of depth to the mode right now. So just trying to learn, all the weapons and figuring out what's the best area to just try to hunker down and build up as many points as you can, and how to get all the buffs and summon the champions, all that stuff. There's a lot going on, and there's a couple different modes within zombies as well as different maps. So definitely quite a bit going on there, which is pretty cool to see. But we do have some competitive Overwatch coming up starting tomorrow, which I'm pretty happy about. So there's a lot going on tomorrow. Halloween comes out tomorrow, which is I'm looking forward to. Daredevil Season 3 comes out tomorrow. It's also my birthday tomorrow. Woo!
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah! Speaking of middle-aged white man. Damn. I'm not going to Apple
Still
Pink.
older than you.
I know. This is true. But we do have the return of the Beat Invitational. So let's go ahead and let's jump into the news. So Beat Invitational will return for a 5th season, and for starters, I do not like calling these seasonal because it's a weekend. I never understood the phrasing of that, but that's besides the point.
Weekendal? I don't know.
So Beat Invitational number 5 is taking place from October 19th through the 21st. So you'll have 8 different North American teams competing against one another for a prize pool of $6,600. Now, it's a Thursday. I'd already wrote show notes for a show on Monday, and since then, there have been 2 separate updates to the Beat Invitational. So initially, we had 6 teams announced. We had 3 teams that are going to be competing in the upcoming Contenders North America Season 3. That would be Energy Esports, which is the Shock Academy team.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto Esports, which would be the Boston Academy team, not Toronto. Which I know is going to confuse people now that, Toronto is going to be a team. As well as our Golden Boys, last night's leftovers, the team that knocked the Outlaws Academy into trials. They knocked them out so far out, that they're not even a thing anymore.
They obliterated them as a team,
yeah.
Not even in contention anymore.
And it's because of LNL that, all these trials teams are getting a free win. So, looking at the trial side, now we have Sky Foxes who, are coming out with a new roster, a new mixed roster. A couple Korean players added to the mix, playing on some pretty high pain. And last I checked, they were still undefeated in trials. So they're definitely the trials team to keep an eye on. We also have Second Wind and Bye Week, who Bye Week was, we dubbed them pre-win because they would basically lose every week. Not to be confused with GG Esports Academy, who are literally giving people free wins because, they're not competing. So there was that. So, there were 2 teams that were still up in the air. So flash forward, a couple of days later, and we got the announcement of the next 2 teams. So we got Goats and Phase 2 as the final 2 teams. So out of this current crop, there is only one winner from a prior Beat Invitational, that being Goats, who did win the last one. Fusion University had won it the year prior, but, FUN is not in this one. So on top of that, we also got our announcement of the other casters. So ZP was initially announced as the caster, and then joining him will have kind of I don't know if they're necessarily rotated. I'm assuming it's just whatever day it is, they will be grouped up for a couple of sets, I would imagine, with ZP. So Reinforce is going to be cast in with ZP. They have Reinforce listed for October 19th and October 21st. And then you have Jaws and Herix, who will be featured on October 20th and October 21st, respectively. So, a bit of a EU caster. I think Herix does Korea, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe he's still EU. I'm drawing a blank.
EU.
I'm pretty sure he's EU.
Yeah, I've only really think I've seen him cast once or twice, so I think it's EU. But I mean, this is a phenomenal tier 2 tournament, and assuming the roster sheet that I was looking at is correct, we're going to get to see some pretty top tier talent play as far as the tier 2 scene goes. I mean, first of all, Sugar Free, he was listed on there playing. So Sugar Free, go watch this kid play. Dogman, if you don't know who Dogman is, definitely look him up. He's one of the better support players. He's also one of the very more vocal support players outside of the game. So if you ever want like some insight to like a tier 2 pro's life, Dogman is the person to follow. Color Hex, Cruz. I mean, there's going to be like a plethora of names that we know in this tournament. Plus, we're going to get to see goats get smashed again, hopefully, as is their tradition now. They're definitely not what they used to be, especially now that people have started figuring out how to counter their one strategy, which is what they're named after. But they'll still be in the hunt for it. But I mean, we both know who I'm gonna root for. It's gonna be Last Night Leftovers, and I hope they claim like another team that they could say, they're never gonna compete again. And I hope it's goats. But beyond that, I really like Last Night Leftovers. They're like Corn Dog 2.0. So I love that underdog story. Plus sugar free. Yeah, I mean this is exciting. Like I am more excited about this than I was through some of Contenders matches. So it's gonna be a fun weekend, and maybe that's just me like jonesing for pro Overwatch at this point. Like I'm like, come on, just give me some more. Like I shaved in anticipation for it. Like I don't know what's going on, but it's gonna be a fun weekend.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see exactly how some of these new look offenses are going to be, because you have Energy Esports who just announced a new roster. Rascal got called up to the Shock. There's a couple of other pieces that also got kind of like moved around, so they're really like coming in with maybe, I'm not gonna say like relative unknowns. I'm pretty sure one of their new players was from like the ladder, and then they had a couple other players that were like from like maybe like tier 2, tier 3. So they're looking completely different. You had Rob Dab, who just retired. So that's been a long-standing competitive Overwatch player. So it's a completely new look Energy Esports. So I'm really curious to see whether or not they're going to be able to have the same amount of success, because that was a team that went from basically the meme team back when it was the stream team. Before Dallas Fuel became a team, and then they actually like legitimized themselves, much to my dismay, because I wanted that meme to stay true throughout the years. So who knows? Maybe they'll revert back to that. I don't know. But if Color Hex is playing, he's definitely going to be one of the players I'm going to be looking at. And if the rumors are correct, he's not going to be staying on Toronto Esports, because he's going to Boston.
Yeah, we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, I gushed earlier, but I'm excited for this. I think this will be a fun little tournament, assuming that they can keep production to a reasonable level. Because you got to remember, this isn't a Blizzard operated tournament, so don't expect like Contenders or Overwatch League or anything like that in terms of like match production and my brain went dead. Spectating. That's the word I was looking for. So, but they've always done well in the past, and I expect at least that level of quality in this one. And I'm excited. I like watching CP and I like watching Reinforce. So, the other two, we'll see how they plan out. But if they do, good for them.
Yeah, I am curious to see how Reinforces do casting, because Jake was doing pretty well, so I'm curious to see whether or not all that work at the desk is correlating like practice in regards to actual cast work.
So ZP is like the caster trainer at this point. Like he's like their teacher, and he's gonna do like the bulk of the casting, and then he's gonna be like, Reinforce, what do you think about this? And he's gonna be like, oh, I think that tank play was terrible. And then ZP's just gonna pick it back up again, and that's how it's gonna go. And I think that's awesome that he's kind of become that caster mentor. And I hope we get to see him in Overwatch League Season 2, because he's definitely put in the work at this point. Like, there's no question about it.
And this will also mark the first time that Reinforce isn't going to have to do the carrying.
Yeah.
Especially with the talent. nonetheless.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, that was the thing. But anyways, moving on, we do have a couple updates out of the Guangzhou camp, which is one of the new expansion teams, which we'll be talking a little bit more about when we go through the rumored rosters. But they have launched, like their social media, and they sent out this very like ominous video on their Twitter. And while, yes, we have not heard any sort of brand announcements from the 8 expansion teams, a lot of these teams are starting to pop up on social media. Well, one of which was a fake one, like the Paris one, which was so awful and so obviously fake. And they just made it too obvious.
Their
Just like
photoshops were on point, though. Like when they put Kai Kai in that Paris jersey, that was pretty good.
That's a side note. Like the graphic work, a lot of the times with these teams has not been particularly great. So in that aspect, yes, it was convincing, but everything else, definitely not the case. But anyway, so like the video that this expansion team tweeted out was like basically like a bunch of like crashing waves. There was like this creepy lullaby playing in the background. And what we do know about this organization is, whatever the brand is going to be, it's not going to be based on an animal. Now, that being said, like, when Edinar and I were talking about this, I was like, man, I really hope that this is going to somehow tie into the video. As if, they're lost at sea, or something like Squid Base, or Cthulhu, or, maybe even in the Abyss. And then, I was dotting everything together. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Slambo's not actually going to Atlanta. He's going to be on this team. Because they will be the Guangzhou Abyss. And I left it at that. So, I don't know where you think this Brandon is going to go, or if you feel like it's going to be tied in with this video. But I do like that they at least tweeted out, put in like these other teams on notice, but it did leave me wanting to know, well, I hope this is linked somehow and not just like a throwaway tweet, basically.
I can't imagine that they would use that and not have some meaning behind it, but it could just be stock video that they picked. They were like, this looks ominous, let's go with that. Like, who knows what they were thinking. But I mean, it could be like they're like the storm, or something like that, the tsunami, the thunder, the lightning. It'd be kind of derivative because we already have the shock, but there are options. But I totally like yours. I like the Abyss. That's pretty good. It's a little hard to quantify that into a logo, though. Like,
it's just a black hole.
But then they're gonna be like, what are you, the Guangzhou black holes? Like, why isn't space on your team? Like, stuff like that. So I'm curious to see where they go with this, because beforehand I was really counting on the Guangzhou gorillas. Like, that was my go-to, are giraffes, because nobody appreciates giraffes. So I thought maybe they'd go out on a limb, but I hope so. I hope they tie into this and it's not a throwaway. I'm with you.
Well, we did get another update out of this camp in regards to the members that are on their like executive leadership board. So we have Sunny Zhao, who's acting as the CEO. We have Eddie Main, who is acting as the COO. So Sunny is the current president of the basketball operations for the Guangzhou Lawn Lions. What exactly is a lawn lion? Like, I know what a lion is. Is there really any difference? Like, is it just the length? Like, I'm so confused by that. But that's besides.
You don't want to know. You don't want to know.
No, I don't even want to Google it right now.
Yeah, don't look up log lion in Google. Safe search on.
But anyways, Eddie Main is the current. Well, he's been like working with Activision Blizzard for more than a decade. He served as the managing director for like different regions, so basically in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Southeast Asia. And then they also picked up Ethan Liu as the team's general manager, and he's done a lot of work with like Maki Esports as their manager. So we got a couple of the pieces in the background, and more and more we're seeing more traditional sports investors or leaders, or however you want to describe it, like owners too,
Yeah.
venturing into esports, and this is just another way of doing that. But really, like at the end of the day, like I still am hard pressed to believe that there are going to be 4 Chinese teams in season 2. But I do like seeing the fact that at least with this leadership group, they are bringing in someone that has been with the with Blizzard as a company basically for the past 11, 12 years, because you really don't always get that connection. Usually it's just outside sources and not someone from within.
Yeah, I mean they hit the lottery in management styles here. They've got somebody that's actually dealt with a professional team in traditional sports. They have like an ex-Blizzard employee, and then they have a traditional esports manager. So among those three, like they seem to be taking Shanghai's first season lessons to heart, which a lot of these expansion teams really seem to be doing, because I'm going to bring it up when we talk about another team later. But they seem to be investing in the management structure, so that they're kind of hoping like the top down, all that business mumbo jumbo follows through. And I think it's a good idea. I think this type of spread of leadership is great for a team. Like it's going to give them more insight onto how traditional teams work, so that they can structure around that, but they're still going to have the insights of like a Blizzard employee plus a traditional esports manager that's used to the esports scene. So I think as long as these coaches don't, well, they're not all coaches, but as long as this management team doesn't butt heads, like they can work in tandem, I think this could provide a very strong team. And when we talk about who's on that team later, I'm going to reiterate that they could be a very strong team.
Yeah, we will be going over their rumored roster, one member of which is confirmed, which we will talk about, which is a pretty spicy sign-in. But anyways, moving on, speaking of the expansion teams, we do have an update from Toronto. So Toronto's Overwatch League expansion team are actually going to be hosting an unveiling party next week on October 24th. This event is going to be held at Toronto's Berkeley Church from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time. And as a Chicagoan, this is my local team, Toronto.
Yep.
So, that's a thing. So anyways, Spider, what exactly are you expecting from this unveiling? Are we gonna get like just the team name? Are we gonna see like the logo, the color, maybe a roster, staff members? I mean, there's so many different things that they can do. Is it gonna be all in like one full swoop, or is this gonna be like the trickle effect where maybe we'll just get, like the brand and then that's it?
It's gonna be, I have to think it's gonna be the roster, if the roster is who we think it is, and the brand, and maybe some coaches. So I'm interested to see, like, we're gonna definitely talk about it a little later. Oh no, we talked about it last week. So if those rumors come true, then I think that's who they're gonna bring out, and then they'll probably announce whoever else they want to fill out the roster with later. But the one thing I definitely think we're gonna get is the branding. Like I think they have to come out with the branding, because it feels like Toronto's like setting themselves up to be the first one to announce their branding in the traditional Overwatch League fashion of an announcement of an announcement.
Right.
So I have to feel like they don't quite have it, and this is all based on rumors, like they don't have the team like Vancouver does. They don't have existing, trades that have already been announced from previous teams. So I feel like they're just going to come out with like their, like, maybe starting 5, like maybe not their full 6 roster, but like 5 people, and say, this is our core team. We're going to fill it out, in the coming weeks, or we have people in the works just waiting to sign stuff. So I feel like it's going to be a bigger announcement than what I would traditionally expect, just because of what, how they announced the announcement. Like they seem to be generating a lot of fanfare around this, and I feel like from an expansion team, you do not want to oversell that. Like you don't want a Diablo for it. Like you want to temper expectations, but still create hype.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really temper expectations. They're like, we're going to introduce ourselves to the world, which to me says, all right, here's our brand, here's most of our team, here's our head coach.
Right. Yeah. See, for me, like, I would imagine, like, they'll have whoever, like, the major investor is, like, whoever their acting CEO is. You know, they'll have the head coach. Roster-wise, like, they're not going to announce, like, 8 players or anything, like, drastic like that. It'll probably be, 4 to 6 at the most. You definitely have to expect the brand reveal. So you also have to look at the time frame. Well, that's 5 hours. Well, what exactly are they going to be filling that time with? That's a lot of hours to kill. But one way or another, like, the team also did hint at another way for fans outside of Toronto to watch the event. So there's going to be a very good chance that we will be seeing a live stream of sorts happening as well. And if that's the case, I'm definitely going to be tuning in. But, it's looking like next week, well, hold on. It wouldn't be on the next show, because the 24th would be on a Wednesday. So in 2 weeks, we should for sure be covering a brand. But until then, we can only speculate.
Isn't that going to be going on like right in the middle of Heroes Never Die?
Yes.
So
that might be something that's on the fly reported.
Yeah, there you go.
We will have to wait and see about that. But speaking of Canada, there's another Canadian team out there that are from Vancouver, which are not the same thing, believe it or not, Tyler, as Toronto, because the distance from Chicago to Toronto and then Chicago to Vancouver is a lot longer. But Vancouver's actually teamed up with Luminosity Gaming and their CEO, Steve Mata. So Luminosity, really no stranger to the Overwatch scene. They will be working close with Vancouver to implement strategies surrounding player acquisitions, which I don't know how much strategy there is if you're just signing a team, like a full roster, unless they're just talking about like numbers. That's besides the point. Staffing, day-to-day operations, marketing, things like that. So Luminosity, this is an esports organization who had a pretty good history within Overwatch. They've won titles across, multiple games, CSGO, PUBG, Call of Duty, Overwatch, and this is not like the first time that we've seen like a partnership between like an esports organization and like on the management side of like an Overwatch League team. So most notably, like we saw the Sentinels, who were I believe like Phoenix 1 before they rebranded. They were the ones that helped manage the Los Angeles Gladiators, for their major investors, the Kroenke family. So I'm not gonna be like going out of my way to say like, oh, maybe this will mean like Luminosity will be like the Vancouver like expansion team. That's probably not gonna be the case. This is more helping with the day-to-day operations. And what better guideline than by having one of these endemic esports orgs that have been around the scene for quite some time and have a very storied history with Overwatch, because we've seen like so many former Luminosity Gaming, whether it was, LG Evil or the original Luminosity, haven't made their way into the Overwatch League at this point. And while, they might not be as storied as, like an Envious or, a Lunatic High, they definitely are, more grassroots when it comes to Overwatch. They've been around the scene for quite some time. So this is a good pairing. But, it all kind of circles back to, well, player acquisitions, that's already been handled at this point.
Mostly. I mean, you got to remember, teams have to have 8 players on their roster at least. So they got to pick up 2 other players somewhere. So why not let, Luminosity handle it? But I think this is good. This is what I kind of alluded to earlier, is teams saw what happened in season 1 and they're learning from that. And they said, "Hey, it worked out pretty well for the Gladiators. So let's bring in somebody that's more familiar with the scene, more familiar with esports, stuff like that, and let them worry about it. Let us pay them a bunch of money, and they'll worry about it." And I think that's smart. And I'm with you. I don't see LG becoming an academy team, at least right now, because it seems like LG's kind of happy where they are in other esports and willing to just take the money and be a consultant in Overwatch, which is a pretty sweet gig. So why not just, enjoy it while you can get it?
Yeah, I mean, it's more stable than actually having an Overwatch team at times. So there's that.
Especially if you go off of Illuminati's past Overwatch records.
Yeah, it's been kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But that is besides the point. We do have some, new signings that we do want to talk about. And, we are recording later in the week. So some of the new signings from, the past day or two, we're going to hold off on until Monday show. Because we are going to have a short time in between shows due to the schedule. So
you could say it's too soon.
Yes, it is too soon. But we will not be talking about soon. We'll be talking about soon, which will be on Monday. Because
announcement of an announcement.
Yes. I mean, we're just learning from the expansion teams at this point. So Florida has made some sign-ins, which 100% confirm our suspicions that Tavik is driving the bus and also getting kebabs for the team. So what does that mean for the Mayhem? Well, it means that they went out of their way, they signed 3 players, and, this is all pending, league approval. But all of these players that are coming in are Korean. Really not that big of a surprise. When we entered, the free agent period, it was, I don't remember, what ratios we gave, but, I felt like it would be, 80% Korean, 20% the rest of the world. That seems to be pretty accurate so far.
That's basically the league at this point.
We're getting to that point for sure. So joining the Mayhem, they signed a support player, a DPS player, and a tank player. For support, they signed Chris. DPS, they signed BQB. Then tank, they had signed Swan. So Chris and BQB had both previously played in Contenders Korea. Chris was part of Meta Athena, and he's been competing in the scene in Apex, which was, later rebranded into Contenders Korea. So he's been around, the Korean scene since 2016. You have BQB, who was a very established DPS player for X6 Gaming, and, X6 had won Season 1 Contenders in Korea back in 2017. And, they basically, went in, they ran shots straight through the Cinderella team, who were O2 Ardiant at the time, but he kind of fell into hot water for promoting boosting services, and he got fined and suspended by X6 Gaming, so he was completely out of Season 2 of Contenders. And then if we look at Swan, this is someone that originated on Team Kondu. Before he ended up signing to the Shox Academy team, the meme team of Energy Esports. And he served as the team's main tank for both Contender seasons in North America. And, that team made the playoffs in each season. Now, they didn't necessarily, win any titles or anything. But for Energy standards, making the playoffs in itself was a big improvement over the prior iterations. Mm-hmm. So all in all, it's just we got 3 more Koreans on this roster. It's looking like the starting 6 are probably going to be full Korean. Mm-hmm. Plus 1 to Vic. I'm not going to include Apply, because I feel like Apply is still going to be on Mayhem Academy, on that 2-way contract. Yeah. But, we have Ryder talking about, okay, yes, we have someone that was promoting boosted. What can we do to, try to counteract this? And, their plan is... Okay, we'll try to improve his reputation by doing some community service. Ryder might even do it with him, based on what he was saying. But, boosting and Overwatch League has... that topic has been beaten to death at this point. And... Yeah. I feel like at the end of the day, there are two causes of this, and it goes back to the state of Tier 2, and also the current state of rank play. Like, a lot of people, if they look at boosting, like, they're like, okay, I don't want to be in Elo Hell. So they go to, getting boosted. Or, talked about the Tier 2 scene, there's been some issues with, player payments, and if you're not making any money, you kind of need some way to get revenue.
You need to make some money.
And, I'm not going to say a lot of people, but there have been a number of players that have turned to doing something like this. So it's not out of the ordinary, but it is definitely frowned upon in Korean culture, especially with how big esports is in Korea. But, like, on our side, doing community service is a noble thing to do, and it's definitely going to improve relations, at least on our side of the world. But I feel like no matter what, at the end of the day, in Korean culture, they're just gonna be like, well, that doesn't change anything. But regardless, like, these are some pretty good sign-ins for the Mayhem, and this is a team that finished in 11th place. Like, we know Bare Hands is kind of like at the backbone of piecing together this new look roster. So, kind of like looking at things right now, like, how would you rank the Florida Mayhem going into the second season, knowing that we've had like this basic overhaul of this roster now that we are without the Misfits core?
I'd have to put them somewhere in the middle, at least. If we were purely comparing them to last season's roster, I would definitely give them a benefit of the doubt, especially because the players that they have picked up are phenomenal players, assuming that they all make it onto the team. BQB is an amazing DPS player, so good that people were paying him to play in their games for him. But beyond that, they have a pretty solid tank lineup, regardless of what configuration they go with it. And that's kind of what I'm looking for in season 2. Is I think tank play is going to really dominate how teams play, especially depending on what kind of hero announcements we get. But if you take the vacuum of this meta right now, the types of tanks you run dictate what type of gameplay you play. If you're running goats, you go Ryan Zarya. If you want to run dive, you can run Winston Diva. If you want to go like smash dive, which is hamster, Doomfist Sombra. So I feel like with Swan, Awesome Guy, and Zephyr, they have any configuration that they can run between those three, and they have a good success. I would say a good chance for success with that, and that alone gives me hope. But then they also kind of shored up their backline with Hagapun. I don't know much about Chris, so Chris is like the question mark to me, but Hagapun is a clear step up from their previous two supports of Zupe and Zebasai, just because of the sheer fact that he can stay alive. So like that alone, puts him, way up there. And I think this will be an interesting roster to keep an eye on. The only problem I have with this roster is the other rosters look just as strong, if not stronger. Like, looking at it in a vacuum, I can say all these nice things about it, but when you take them outside of that abyss, you kind of have to start comparing them. And I feel like that's something we didn't do very well last season. We kind of just said, okay, well, these players look like they suck, so Boston's going to be 12th, and we didn't realize that there's like a whole cohesion thing going on. So I have high hopes for them. Like, I hope they're not going to be an 11th place team again, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. The closer the bottom teams are to the middle, the better the league will be.
Yeah, definitely. And, definitely, like, at some point, leading into the new season, we should probably talk about, like, just, like, go through the teams and figure out, like, okay, what teams do we think are, gonna have, like, the biggest, like, net gain, as well as, like, net loss? Like, who are gonna be the teams that, are probably gonna see, a little bit less of an impact than what we would be expecting, things like that. But, like, we definitely learned our lesson with the whole Boston thing and just judging things just purely based on paper. But right now there's only so much you can do without seeing these teams play. But by the looks of it, like, adding on to the fact that teams are playing less games overall, so that in itself is going to elevate the games. We'll have teams that are having bye weeks, which is just give them extra time to prepare for their next week's games. So I'm really hoping the distance between the 7th through, we'll say, 12. Because that seems like the best way to go based on the win or go home side of the bracket at the end of Stage 4. I hope that part in particular is going to be within a couple of games of one another from that top to that bottom, just because that will make that pre-end of season playoffs that much more exciting. But across the board, Season 2 definitely has me more amped up in a sense that, we've already gone through a season, so, we've seen teams make mistakes, and we've seen teams looking to correct said mistakes, and, the level of competition is only going to increase from this point on, which I'm excited about. And something else that we can expect to see is, Overwatch League fantasy leagues popping up. So, Overwatch League fantasy sites were pretty uncommon in Season 1. We did have High Noon Pick'em, which had, their Pick'em site. That was their main focus, and we kind of partnered with them. We were one of the promoted leagues, and we did kind of have the best prizes out of everyone by far. And we did that, and now they're actually launching their version of Fantasy Overwatch League. So in Season 1, it was basically Winston's Lab, and then nothing else. Yep. And, we had some of the podcasters trying out Winston's Lab's Fantasy last season. And, it was fine for what it was, but then...
serviceable.
Then, Winston's Lab was we're gonna change how this works, scoring-wise. And they did that multiple times, and it pissed a lot of us off. So, I know myself, I'm definitely probably not going to be using Winston's in this upcoming season. I'm going to be using whatever Matt is working on for High Noon's Overwatch League Fantasy. So I want to talk a little bit about what they're putting in place for theirs, because theirs is not as traditional as fantasy football, things like that. So basically what you're going to have are teams that are comprised of team slots along with the team captain. So let's say, we'll use the Gladiators X example. Let's say you have the Gladiators DPS. You will have basically all of their players that are listed as DPS on your team. So it's not let's say Hydration is benched.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of who is starting on that roster for the Gladiators, you're still going to be eligible for those points. So you're not going to be losing out on, someone being on the bench or not playing, or being a two-way player, things like that. You're not going to be penalized for that like you would otherwise. So that's very unique, something a little bit different.
It's smart.
Yeah, because it definitely takes out. I mean, you have to factor in. It's in Overwatch, you can have substitutions, in between games, so you don't have to even worry about that. So you're gonna get points no matter what. So yes, you are gonna have a draft. So each round you'll be drafting a player. First up, you'll draft a player. So you'll pick a team category. So you'll have you'll be able to pick from tank, DPS, support. I believe flex is the other option, which is. That's something I have to talk with their developer with, because flex can be pretty dicey in the way that it's categorized with certain players.
Is it flex support, flex tank,
right?
Flex
DPS? It mixes. It's technically all.
Pure
of them.
flex.
Right.
Yeah.
It's technically all of them. So that's kind of murky waters. So that's definitely something to note right now. But this is still early planning. You'll pick a team category. You'll draft based off of that. So each round, you'll draft, basically a team captain for your team. And the way this is work is you're basically going to build your team and change your captain each week before matches start. So, you'll have points being assigned based on the performance of each player, each, category. So, your Gladiator's DPS will get your points, or, like, your Uprising, tank line, whatever, just as examples. So this will be, like, head-to-head competition, just like traditional, fantasy sports. And your overall record will be based on how you are ranked within the league, with points being, like, a tiebreaker overall. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out with the team slot aspect, because, like, I personally haven't played, like, a fantasy, I haven't played a fantasy league with this type of rule set, so it's going to be completely unique in its own way, but, like, I play fantasy football pretty much every year. I've dabbled in, like, baseball and hockey, and those were, there's just too many games going on to really dive into it. At least with football, you don't have to worry about, like, a couple of days a week. It's not that much time consuming, and this is going to be more the same. So with that being said, Spider, I don't know if you're planning, like, if you're big into fantasy with sports or anything, but is this something that you're going to be looking at doing to maybe get you more invested in watching some of these other games that maybe you might not have watched otherwise?
And you mean it, you can stop beating around the bush. Just another competition for me to come in third place in? Yes, this is absolutely something I'm interested in. I like the concept of fantasy, sports like fantasy football, fantasy baseball, and stuff like that. It's just something that I'm not that invested in. Like, I don't care enough about those to really sit down and, like, moneyball the crap out of it. Whereas Overwatch, I'm doing that anyway. Like, I'm the one who pulls the stats. I'm the one that does that stuff anyway. So, absolutely, I'll take advantage of that. And I think this, team, position idea is really good because of the way Overwatch operates. Like, you never, like, in say fantasy football, you have a general idea of who's going to play that game, if they're going to start, stuff like that. Like, if you have Tom Brady as a quarterback, you're going to typically play him because 99 times out of 100 Tom Brady's going to be playing, unless he gets hurt or something crazy happens, like he gets hit by a car, something wild that I can only dream of. But in Overwatch, you don't have that same level of assurance for any player, like, other than Neptuno, who played, like, every game. But outside of him, it could be like, if Taimu is having a bad day, maybe they swap him out, which could happen. Like, any of your DPS could go at any time. Or take Philadelphia, for example, like, going off of their old roster, who's going to play? Was it going to be Shadowburn? Was it going to be EQO? Like, there was a time when there was a huge question of who was going to play, and in a fantasy league, that would be a nightmare because there isn't any, like, injury reserve sheets. There isn't any, like, starting lineup sheets, stuff like that. It was basically like Malik up there on stage going Shadowburn, and you're like, crap, I played EQO today. So I think the position is a really smart way to do it once they hammer out that flex spot, because I think that's going to be the I think maybe just require every team to have one flex and then just roll the dice like that. I think that's enough level of RNG that you could get away with, as long as you force everyone to have a flex. If you don't force everyone to have a flex, no one's going to have a flex, because it's not going to be a guaranteed spot that they have to slot in there. So we'll see how they do it, but I hope that's how they do it. And I'm absolutely pumped for this. Like you said, I did Winston's Lab, and I lost interest almost immediately as soon as they changed the rules the first time. I'm like, I don't want to relearn all this stuff. I don't want to redraft or change points, or maybe I think what actually happened is, I think the people that I drafted were okay under the old point system, but then when they redid the point system, the people I had were garbage, and I was like, I'm not going to win, so I'm not invested in this anymore. So I'm excited. Like, we're going to be doing it anyway, and we're going to be talking about it. And you have, stuff in the works for other projects under the Overwatch League network umbrella that could revolve around fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did make note of this on last night's HND, but we are planning on expanding our network to include a fantasy Overwatch League podcast. So with that being said, right now the plan is Adonar and I will both be hosting it. We are going to be trying to find a third person. So if you have any interest in talking Fantasy Overwatch League, whether you're a listener or a podcaster, whatever, please reach out to us. You can email us either on, the contact at owlendshow.com email or the H&D one, which is hndOverwatch@gmail.com. And we're basically we're already mapping out our plans for the show. Most of the segments we pretty much have already talked about or are near finalized at this point, but we do want to bring in a third person to help balance out the show for sure. So if you guys are interested, please reach out, but we will still be doing, we'll have our High Noon Pick'em League. That's still going to be a thing. I doubt we'll do as hefty of a prize pool just because all of that was completely out of pocket. And we put up some pretty good prices for the first season. That was a pretty big deal. So we'll have that. We'll have our fantasy league. We'll have one that will be probably one with all the Overwatch League Network hosts at some point with maybe the podcast crew. And depending on how big the league sizes are going to be, we'll have a couple public ones as well. Or, maybe some private ones if they do any sort of password type settings or things like that. But we are going to be doing Fantasy Overwatch League for sure. And, this is completely separate from their pick'ems. So whether or not we incorporate, maybe some Fantasy Overwatch League stuff, maybe in regards to just saying picking winners for some of the marquee matches, we could go back to doing that on this show. But for now, that's our plan. So expect that to probably happen, probably starting January, I would imagine, around there, since February is the start of the second season. So that's something to look forward to. That'll be technically the fourth podcast on the Overwatch League network, podcast network, basically. And we got to decide whether or not we're going to keep that podcast in itself on one of the current feeds or just create a new one. But either way, we have a creator page on iTunes. So if you search for Overwatch League Network and you just click on the provider, it'll pull up, Heroes Never Die. It'll pull up this podcast, Overwatch League Network. It'll pull up Overwatch Recall, and it'll have a link in iTunes to each feed, basically. So if we do a separate one, there's still going to be an easy way to find it just by searching for Overwatch League Network. So stay tuned for that. I know we're all excited about that. Slambo is in the abyss, but I know he'll be pretty excited for Fantasy Overwatch League, as is Edinar, as are you. We're all going to be pretty invested one way or another, so, yeah, looking forward to that. But anyways, we do have to talk about the other side of the rumor mill when it comes to the expansion teams, because we covered the Atlantic Division expansion teams last week. This week, we'll be talking about the Pacific Division for our main discussion. So, we'll be talking about the new Chinese teams. Well, the one new Chinese team and two Korean teams?
Yeah.
And
the new Chinese teams located in China that aren't full of Chinese players. That's a lot of air quotes. I don't think I need that many air quotes.
Our audio listeners are definitely going to appreciate that, but that's besides the point. So, we're talking about the three Chinese teams. We'll be talking about the Vancouver Runners. And, yeah, we'll of course talk about, one of the signs that did happen, or one of the trades, technically. So first up, let's talk about Chengdu. So this is the Chinese team.
Woo!
Yes, the one actual rumored Chinese team, based on the actual roster, not location, the actual roster. So again, just like last week, we are going to preface these are rumored rosters / unofficial. So please keep that in mind. So for the tank line for Chengdu, we have Jikarin, Leityun, Tian. For DPS, they have Bacon Jack, Eileen, who is rumored for a couple of rosters. Just a quick side note. as well as Cammy. And then for supports, they have Sky and Yveltal. So, looking at this roster, this is basically, well, not like basically, like part of this roster is Miraculous Youngster. You know, rewind, right? Back to Season 1. What was the big issue with Shanghai? People are like, MY was by far the best Chinese team. And yes, some of them were underage. But this was a team that was consistently beating some of the top-level Korean teams out there. So a lot of people were up in arms on, why isn't Miraculous Youngster in the Overwatch League? Well, so on this roster, you know, you have Zhu Fanjun, who goes by Sky now. You know, he was on the Shanghai Dragons prior. Zhikarin and Leityun all come from Miraculous Youngster. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that RUI was tapped to be the head coach for this team. You know, he was with Shanghai in Season 1. He was also the coach for Miraculous Youngster. And, you know, kind of like looking at some of the other names on here, you know, you have someone like Bacon Jack, who I'm a huge fan of. Like, I've been a big fan of Flash Wolves, especially in the Taiwan scene of Overwatch. They were always, like, one of the standouts. And, you know, he's kind of, I think he might have even retired at one point after Flash Wolves kind of dissolved. But he was, like, one of my favorite Tracer players. So, like, when I saw his name on here, I was pretty happy to see that. And then, you know, Eileen, really no surprise that, you know, some of these Chinese teams are all trying to scout Eileen, because, you know, this is a Genji Doomfist player, and, you know, Eileen has just been at, like, near the top level of Chinese play for quite some time, even, you know, stacked up against some of the other continents out there as well. You know, you also have, you know, some components from Lingan Esports, so you have, you know, Cammy, Yveltal from that team. But at the end of the day, like, right now, this is going to be the only, like, national Chinese team, basically. So, like, they're going to try to do what Shanghai failed to do. And will it result differently now that they're kind of built around MY? Or is this going to be kind of, like, more of the same? Like, it's so hard to tell, but, like, I'm at least happy to see that one of the 4 Chinese teams, right, is actually going to try to do a national roster, because, you know, Shanghai was a disaster, and if any team from that region is going to be able to turn it around, it will be the team that was behind Miraculous Youngster, or, you know, a team like T1W, for example, another one of the mainstays.
Yeah, I mean, this team, if this is what it turns out to be, is super stacked. Like, the biggest piece they're missing is Leave, and I think Leave is still underage, so I don't think he could be part of this. As far as I know, if he's not underage, he's very close to, like, the cutoff. But Zoom Fan June, Sky, he's phenomenal. Is you know, honestly, the two standouts for me were the ones that you kind of touched on, were Eileen and Bacon Jack. But Yveltal, or however you say that, is actually on the Korean national team this year in Overwatch League. And when we are not Overwatch League, Overwatch World Cup, and when we talked about Overwatch World Cup, they were one of the standout support players for that group stage. So I'm really interested to see how this team comes together, and I hope this is a redemption story for China as a region, because China has some phenomenal players. If you watch the World Cup, you can see, like, they are just operating on, you know, that high level, like that high, you know, Korean, what we, you know, associate with the Korean level. And I feel like they could make a run at it. Like, you know, when we do our power rankings, once everything, all the dust and salt and spice has settled, when we do our power rankings, if this team looks similar to how it looks now, I'm gonna do the same thing I did with Shanghai and give them the benefit of the doubt and place them, you know, somewhere near the middle of the pack.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I don't know how old Leaf is. I know he's underage, just because, like,
yeah,
he would be linked to a lot of these expansion teams if he was of age. So that's something to keep in mind. But, you know, a lot of these Chinese players, Especially when we're looking at the World Cup, like you kind of like look at the DPS and it's just like their McCree play is just on another level right now. So Eileen is definitely going to be picked up. There's no doubt about that. Bacon Jack like is really the only name on this list, and I'm like, well, I don't know if he fits, but like they'll obviously need like more components to be able to work in. You need to have those backup players. But right now, like this for me, I'm not gonna say you're gonna be like this standout Chinese team by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like this team would fare better than what Shanghai did in Season 1. And a lot of that just has to do with the fact that you already have the synergy from a lot of these players to begin with. So, pretty exciting team. But the next team that we're going to be talking about is the one that I'm definitely more intrigued by out of the Chinese rosters. So, we'll talk about the Guangzhou Abyss, which... working title, that might not even be the name, but we're going to go with it, just like, the Atlanta airports. So, for the tank line, unofficially, I'm going to say that every time, we have Rio, and, a certain player that you guys might be familiar with that was formerly on the Philadelphia Fusion, that being Hotba. This is confirmed. This did, in fact, happen. So, out of this entire roster, this one is for sure happening.
For real.
For real. Like, it's really happening. So, DPS, we have Happy, Eileen, so, again, Eileen linked to more than one team, Crystal, and then for supports, they look to be going the Boston route, so they have 4 listed. They have Chara, Shu, Wanjie Lee, and... Gary? I'm assuming that's Gary, even though there's 2 R's. So, Guangzhou, this is built around a core roster from Metabellum. You have Chara, Rio, Happy, Wanjie Lee. You also have, another person that was from the metagaming family in Shu, who is a flex support player, who I believe he's currently on Toronto Esports. And then, speaking of T1W, you have their star DPS player, Crystal, who has definitely been one of the Chinese players on that team that has definitely been styling on folks. With the McCree play, which is great to see. But, the Fusion trading Hotba to this expansion team, Hotba definitely had some pretty crazy moments in Season 1. This was a player who... I'm not gonna say, he really fit the bill for Philadelphia, just based on the fact that they seem to be, they want to go, 110% of the time when it comes to their aggression, and Hoppa does try to play a bit more passively on the tank line. So, there were moments where, we saw Hotba, when Philadelphia was kind of, experimenting, where they would flex Hotba onto, Tracer, and, he would just... be run-shotting through people. Probably the first thing that comes to mind was when the Fusion beat the Uprising on Volskaya, which was Boston's map. Heck, the casters kept calling it, Boston
Pretty win.
Volskaya. Well, yeah, basically they're playing on Volskaya. We know who's gonna win this map. So I'm happy for Hotba because it gives him a chance to actually play full time. On top of the fact that maybe this is just going to be a better fit for him stylistically, so that in itself is going to definitely elevate his game. But out of the Chinese teams, this one and the next team that we're going to be talking about are definitely the 2 standouts, but, I feel like, if they get Crystal, if they get Eileen, this should be the standout Chinese team.
I would agree with that unless they just get one of them. I don't think one of them is enough to carry a team.
Right.
So, and I think Hoppa's a good player, and I think you're right. I don't think he fit Philadelphia well. So maybe this team can work around him and play around him a little better because flex tank is an important role to play around. that being said, I'm curious to see how they do, because there is a lot of unknown factors in this roster, as is presented right now. So who knows if this is how it actually ends up. Um, I'm also curious to see why they signed, like why they're thinking of signing four supports. Like I feel like that's part of the rumor mill. Like I feel like they're not going to end up with four supports. I feel like that's just who they know has tried out for the team, and that's not how it's going to actually end up. But yeah, Crystal would be phenomenal, and this is the only team Crystal was linked to, so I'm counting that as a little bit more valid than Eileen. Yeah, part of me thinks that Eileen will end up with Chengdu, just because that seems like a more traditional Chinese team, and I feel like they're gonna start throwing money at Eileen just to get like a full Chinese team. But I'm curious, like you said, this team could be the standout Chinese team if they do get Eileen and Crystal. I think that's enough to at least put them on the map. But I'm going to reserve judgment on this one and a lot of judgment on the next one until we know for sure who's actually on there.
Yeah, and it is important to note, like, Metabellum is part of Metagaming, so, you have Meta Athena, you have Metabellum, so, you got sister teams, basically, both South Korean teams, and, this is a franchise that does have a pretty storied history, and they've kind of, I feel like, consistency-wise, when it comes to competition and the results, they haven't necessarily always been, like, a top Korean team. But, you've had a lot of players on these rosters that have had very storied careers. So, like, looking back at some of the past players that you've had on these teams, like right now for Metabellum, you have, in the past anyway, you have Marvel, who has been linked to Seoul, if I'm not mistaken. That's been under rumor mill, who's been playing for Lucky Future Zenith. You have Effect, who was on Meta Athena in the past. Probably the biggest name to come out of that team. Arhan, awesome guy. Saya player. Recry, Libero. There's been a ton of, like, big name players that have been part of this organization, so they've had a knack for definitely scouting talent. But it's just a matter of them putting everything together. Meta Athena was definitely kind of, like, on the rise, known for their effective, like, strategy building, because they did some of, like, off-meta stuff. Off-meta in the sense of it wasn't the norm, not off-meta in the fact that, it was people not on the actual organization. That's besides the point. That was bad terminology, but that's what you get for naming your team Metagaming. So, it's definitely an interesting team, and, like, I don't know how I feel about building around kind of, like, one of the middle-of-the-pack teams when it comes to a core roster. That being said, though, we've seen, Overwatch League franchises try to build around more established, like, well-known or more history teams, and that didn't really work out either, so what do I know? Like, maybe this is going to be the answer where maybe the individual talent from this core roster will be able to propel them enough. But either way, like, it's definitely interesting that we're seeing more of these middle-of-the-pack core rosters being the component of these expansion teams. And, there's another Chinese team that we need to talk about, which is Hanzu. So, when we're looking at the tank line, I almost said Hanzo, which I don't even... that could be the pronunciation. I don't know. I'm terrible at pronouncing.
That would be terrible.
Yeah, don't do that. So, for the tank line, we have Gu Shui. No Smite, Rhea. Again, unofficial. DPS-wise, we have Godsby, Abazi, and Dora. With the support line of Bebe, Revenge, and IDK. Now, when you look at this roster, this is a Korean roster featuring one Chinese player.
Woo!
This one Chinese player is actually fluent in Korean. So that is important to note. So, Gu Shui, main tank for Team China this year. Honestly, like, if we're looking at all the tanks, out of the field, like, I've most been impressed by Gooshway on the main tank role, out of, like, all the main tanks that are currently in the competition.
Easily.
Off tank-wise, we're a little biased. Space. For sure. But
he's pretty good, I guess.
He's pretty good at pulling things into the abyss. But anyway, so Hanzu is building a roster around X6 Gaming. So, you have Godsby, No Smite, Bebe, and Rhea. The other components of this roster are pulled from one of the middle of the pack Korean teams in 7. And then, really, they complement that with IDK, who's really been, the standout Lucio player from Lucky Future Zenith. Now, that being said, there was also some other news that we didn't even cover prior. Billy, who is the owner of this organization, actually filed a trademark for Railgun. Now, I don't know how you feel about that name, if it is going to be the franchise name, but, I'm not feeling it, Spider. That just... I don't know, there's something off-putting about Hanzu Railgun.
I mean, yeah, it's weird. It's different, but so was the Shock, so was the Valiant. It could be something, that is lost in translation. Who knows what it actually is going to be. But as far as the players and stuff go, I think this is actually an interesting team. I'm not as hyped as I am for the other Chinese teams as I am for this one, because it does seem like a lot of the middle of the road stuff. But just like I said before, I'm not going to count them out, because cohesion and team play are much more important than individual player skill. So I think this team has the potential, if they do build around X6. Obviously this is all unofficial, but if they do build around X6, and then put a couple of those star power players in there, like IDK, in Guangzhou or Gushu, or Gumshoes, however you say his name, and I will absolutely practice their names so I get their names right once they're actually officially in the league. But until then, I'm not putting the work in. But I feel like overall this could be a middle of the road team, but I'll wait and see. I'm not gonna get too far into this team, like I said during the previous team, until I know for sure, and then I'll start digging into the players and see what we're really dealing with.
Yeah, for me, the standout player, Gooshway is definitely going to be a standout player. Him being fluent in Korean is definitely going to help him, because, maybe that make them start Gooshway over No Smite for the main tank role. But, it's kind of hard to say, whether or not his play would be the deciding factor to start him over No Smite, considering that No Smite and Rhea are both from X6 Gaming, so they already have that, built-in cohesion on the tank line to begin with. But that being said, there were also some instances in Season 1 where, we had some old tank duos maybe not played to the level that you would have expected, given the synergy already. The Gladiators kind of come to mind in regards to that with, Fisher and Void. But anyways, this one is definitely going to be a curious case. It's kind of like a case of, the last team that we talked about when it comes to, having one of these middle-of-the-road teams. Because 7 initially kind of, rose to fame with, how they were doing in regards to, Open Division and Contenders Trials. And, they gained a little bit of momentum there, but ever since, making the main stage... it's definitely tempered my expectations of that team once they get into the larger pool of talent, basically. So they haven't quite had the same amount of success as they had at, kind of the Tier 3 scene. But, this could be a situation where you might be pulling a diamond out of the rough, for all we know.
Could be Boston all over again.
It very well could be. So, with that being said, we have one more team that we need to talk about. A team that a team that will literally run away with the competition out of the expansion teams unofficially. And, we do have an update from Runaway, for starters. So Vancouver has long been rumored to be Runaway. The Season 2 Overwatch Contenders Korea champions.
Cinderella story.
The team that has been through thick and thin, always... you are the Runaway of the host when it comes to basically any competition. You're always... putting up the fight, but you can't quite make that jump. But, unlike Runaway, they actually did win. So there is that. So, going through the unofficial roster, you got the tank line, Bumper, Janu. DPS, you got Hoxel, Stitch, Hureg. Supports being Slime and Twilight, with Cian Minsu being their flex player. And what I found interesting is, this is the only... team, expansion-wise, on this list that actually had Flex listed separately, and not, having them worked into somewhere else. But, so, talking about Vancouver, for one, this is the full Runaway roster. We did have Flowervin post an update. She's been doing a lot of streaming, and I do want to talk a few things about what she had said on the stream, because it is worth noting when we're talking about this team. So, Flowervin announced that the team's full roster was signed by an undisclosed Overwatch League team for the second season. All signs point to Vancouver at this point, given how many links there already are with the other teams. The transfer fees were settled back in September, and, there's been a lot of, numbers being thrown around when it comes to the contracts, but Flowervin does believe that the salary is on the higher end for the Overwatch League, and that the players are, pretty happy with their deal. So I'm sure they shelled out a good amount of change to get Runaway. So we don't know whether or not any of the staff is coming over with them. We do know Flowervin is staying with their Contenders team, who have made a few sign-ins themselves for the upcoming season of Contenders. And, this is a team that... they took Contenders Korea last season. That was back in August. This has been a team that has made deep runs in basically every tournament that they've played in. And, they were always the team that, would come in second. I think, the best comparison, if you're talking about, other teams out there, probably Reunited would be the best team to compare them to, because Reunited was, the same way in Europe. They would make deep runs. They would finish in second. That's why we had the hashtag forever second for Runaway. And for, Reunited, when Reunited was still around. That's where your hashtag came from. Living up to that expectation. But all in all, in Season 1, we saw, these full, core rosters being brought in. Misfits to Florida. You had Lunjakai brought into the Dynasty. Envious to the Dallas Fuel. And for the most part, didn't work out so well. You had London bringing in Call to Panthera and GC Busan, and their story was a little bit different, but, it took them a while to figure out, okay, what is the best path for us to take as a team? And, they did eventually make changes later in the season, and they were able to right their ship at that point. But all in all, you've had, these very storied franchises that, have been championship caliber in the past, and they kind of, I'm not going to say, they fell flat, but they definitely didn't live up to the expectations. So, as a Runaway fan, and also someone that was a very big fan of, Luntakai's core roster, it's very hard for me to not temper my expectations a little bit, just knowing that, well, I've already kind of gone through this with the Dynasty, and, we saw the Dynasty story play out where, they were close to playoff berths, but they didn't make any stage playoff. They didn't make the end of season playoffs, and at least in this case, like, if they finish 7th through 12th, there's still a shot that they might make the playoffs. So, you have like this extra 4 slots in there just specifically for Seoul. But like with Runaway being brought in for this roster, like, what are you expecting from them based off of the fact that we've already seen like a lot of like mixed bags when it comes to these mixed rosters, at least in season 1? Like, are you expecting them to have a similar like trajectory, or are they going to be like one of the standouts where maybe they are able to dispel that notion where it's okay to build around a full team and not complement 4 or 5 players?
Well, I think the structure of season 2 is going to lead them a little more leniency than season 1 did. I think season 1 hit a lot of existing teams like a brick wall, namely Seoul and Dallas. So I feel like that's going to help them. The fact that they're going to have less games overall, they're going to have more time to prep, more time to actually be a living, breathing person and not just a bot sitting at a computer. But I'm with you. I'm going to temper my expectations. I feel like stage 1, we will probably see them middle of the pack, maybe upper middle of the pack. And then I think once they get a bearing on it, as long as they can keep up with the metas, which Runaway seems, more capable than most teams. They are a little more meta proof than certain teams, like Houston, at least at the moment. So I feel like Runaway has a chance to be a successful team. We talk about like Dallas and Florida are the two. Seoul was like middle of the road. I wouldn't say they were an absolute failure. They hit some bumps along the road, and those bumps were bigger than they probably expected them to be. Right. Whereas teams that I would say objectively failed in season 1 would be Dallas and Florida, Runaway and Envious. Dallas made a rebound in stage 4, and as a Dallas fan, I was happy to watch that. But anybody who is a Dallas Fuel fan that said season 1 was not a failure is just doing a disservice to themselves. And when you look at those rosters going into season 1, both of those rosters had problems. Envious had been on a downslide, basically going into the end of Contenders season 0, and they won Contender season 0 because there was no competition, but they were already clearly on a downslide at that point. Misfits, same thing. Like they were kind of top of their bracket because their bracket was so sparse of competition. So going into season 1, there was clear problems with their roster, and then going in with a 6-man roster didn't help that at all. So I don't want to put the preconceived notions of existing teams can't work in Overwatch League, because they absolutely can work as long as they are managed properly. And like I said, season 2 is going to help that a lot. Like, there's not going to be as much burnout. There's not going to be, as much tension. And I feel like Runaway has the capability to kind of supplement themselves everywhere else they need. Like I said, like meta stuff like that. So I think there may be a transition period. Like, I don't expect a lot out of them stage 1, but if they do really well stage 1, obviously I'll be very happy. But I feel like long-term success will find them. Whether they take season 2, is yet to be seen. But I feel like they're a team that could definitely get there, at least from what we've seen so far. So I'm excited for this all around, if this ends up being true, because I'm with you. I'm a Runaway fan. They're like the one team we all agree on. Yeah, we exactly. Love watching them play. They are that Cinderella story. He basically, Runner made this team himself and built it up, and then Flowervin has been running it while he's been in the military, and stuff like that. So it's absolutely phenomenal that they could possibly, air quotes again, be in the Overwatch League together. We know they're all in the Overwatch League at this point. We just the only confirmation is whether or not they're together and are Vancouver. So we'll see. when the announcement comes out, that'll be the most climactic anticlimactic announcement, because they're like, we are gonna make our presence known to the world, and don't run away with it, and that'll be the announcement. Like, I'm excited for
Well,
it.
okay, so go circling back real quick. I remember in the article when Vancouver was teaming up with Luminosity Gaming, like I believe they used the terminology "hitting the ground running."
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah, there you go.
That's not very subtle at all. But anyway, so it's only a matter of time. So if Runaway does in fact sign with Vancouver, that'll definitely be probably the only team that all three of us, Slambo included, are on board with. So Toronto will not be my local team. I mean, they still are local, but I'll definitely be cheering for Vancouver over Toronto. So I'm hoping we'll get Runaway. And what better way to instantly get a fan base than by going out and getting like the biggest, Korean team out there.
Oh.
I mean, it worked for Dallas in that case.
It did.
Just in the showing the results. But it might be different.
I was reading the rumor that the Decay bidding war is up to 300K now, and that he possibly got picked up and not by the Valiant. So people are looking at the Valiant like, okay, well, who's gonna play hit scan? And the number one person who replied,
yeah,
Caffrey.
I saw that.
Yeah,
and I
thought that was.
I got a good chuckle when I saw that. I was like,
that's basically what you guys got to hear live. It's that good chuckle of like.
It's like, yeah, okay. Whatever you say, Caffrey, that's not happening. But anyways, let's go ahead. Let's close that. I know you're flaring up a little bit, so if you guys want to help us out,
just catching up to me.
I'll close it out. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to leave us a positive review over on iTunes. We are always looking for ways to improve the show, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, please reach out to us. We do have our Overwatch podcast directory on our website. That is Overwatch Recall. That's also one of the podcasts on our network. So you can find that online on our website, owlnshow.com/owrecall. Then that podcast is releasing weekly. We don't always have interviews weekly, but we're trying to do like bi-weekly interviews. So stay tuned for that. If you guys want to reach us, you can do so a number of ways. You can email the show at contact@owlnshow.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at OWLNshow. We have our website, www.owlnshow.com. And we do have our YouTube channel, which is at www.youtube.com/C/Overwatch League Network. You can join our 200+ member Discord server at discord.me/OWLNshow. We are on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We are a Twitch affiliate, so you can show some additional support by subscribing. We do love Twitch Prime subscribers, or really any subscriber. You can get our awesome, emoticon, which, we'll spam in chat right now. We do have 2 podcasts that are airing live on Twitch weekly. You have Overwatch League Network, which is a show you're currently listening to, which is normally at Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Of course, today's Thursday. That's besides the point. We do have Here's Enough or Die, which is our variety Overwatch show, where we talk literally all things and everything Overwatch, whether it's general Overwatch, Tier 2, Overwatch League, Fantasy Overwatch League, hot community topics, all of that good stuff, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. We also do host streams every Thursday. Well, not every. Traditionally, Thursdays and Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Of course, today being a little bit different because we're podcasting during my normal time. It's still a host stream. I'm still here, and you're here. Yeah. So that's true, technically. But if you want to find the hosts on social media, you can find Spider on Twitter at SpiderGD. Slambo is over on Twitter and also in the Abyss at SlamboverWatch. And as for myself, Tumbling Drunk, I'm on Twitter at TumblingDrunkCTR. But with that being said, guys, we're going to get out of here. I don't know if I'm going to stream after this again, just so I can go finish my series on Netflix, but that's besides the point. But for now, that's going to do it for us, and we will see you back for a smaller, window between shows on Monday for Overwatch League Network, when we'll talk about, some of the bigger trades / releases / whatever you want to call them about, a certain Baguette player. Well, not technically Baguette. He is French.
Could be.
Going to Paris.
They didn't say who he was traded to.
Undisclosed. Yeah, it's Paris, and Paris is.
They're stacked.
Technically, we've already talked about Paris last week, but all signs are pointing to soon to Paris. But we'll talk about that on Monday, guys. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLN Show. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.